Hello and welcome. Let's just jump right into it, shall we? Today, we're kicking off a brand new, highly anticipated series on this explainer. We're diving straight into part 1 of an absolutely fundamental NCERT Class 11 biology chapter, Cell, the Unit of Life. If you're gearing up for competitive exams like Neet, or frankly, if you just want a rock-solid foundation in biology, you are in exactly the right place. Biology is literally the study of living organisms, and when you look around, the sheer, mind-boggling diversity of life is just staggering. But underneath all of those radically different forms, from a microscopic bacteria to a giant banyan tree to you and me sitting here, there is a profound, unifying secret. And that secret is exactly what we're going to unpack today, using the core concepts from your source material. So here's our roadmap for today's session. Section 1, what is a cell? Section 2, Discovery in Early History. Section 3, The Classical Cell Theory. Section 4, Modern Cell Theory. And finally, Section 5, a quick recap of Part 1. I want to start off by posing a really profound question to you, and it's one that's pulled directly from your NCERT text. When you look around your room or step outside, you see both living and non-living things, right? You must have wondered at some point, what is it that makes an organism living? Or what is it that an inanimate thing does not have, which a living thing has? It sounds like a philosophical riddle, but biology actually provides us with a very concrete, physical answer to this.
That brings us to Section 1, what is a cell?
The answer to our riddle is the basic unit of life itself. Whether an organism is just a single, solo unit, meaning it's unicellular, or composed of millions, multicellular, they all absolutely rely on the cell. The precise textbook definition here is that the cell is the fundamental, structural, and functional unit of all living organisms. I really want you to lock in on those two specific words, structural and functional. It means the cell isn't just a static building block, like a brick sitting in a wall. It's a working, dynamic machine. It provides the physical form, the structure, and it performs the physiological processes, the function, that make life possible at all. To truly wrap our heads around what makes a cell the ultimate unit of life, we have to look at unicellular organisms. For a single-celled organism to actually be considered a living entity, it has to pass two strict tests. Step 1, it must be capable of independent existence. It has to be able to survive out there on its own in its environment. Step 2, it must be capable of performing the essential functions of life. We're talking metabolizing nutrients, excreting waste, and so on. And summarizing this perfectly is an absolute golden rule from the text. Read this carefully because it's a huge takeaway for your exams. Anything less than a complete structure of a cell does not ensure independent living. If you take a cell and break it apart, say you isolate just a nucleus, or just grab a chloroplast, that individual piece cannot sustain life on its own. It just can't. The complete integrated structure of the cell is the absolute bare minimum requirement for independent life. Let's move into Section 2, Discovery and Early History. So how did we even find out these things exist? Well, it all kicked off with Robert Hooke, who first discovered and coined the term cell by looking at dead cork tissue. But while Hooke was looking at dead cells, Anton Von Leeuwenhoek was the very first person to actually see and describe a live cell. This is an incredibly important distinction to nail down for your exams. Later down the line, we have Robert Brown, who looked much deeper inside the cell and discovered that dense, membrane-bound structure we all know as the nucleus. This brilliantly shows how our understanding of biology is built layer by curious, observant scientists. But let's be real for a second. Hooke, Leeuwenhoek, and Brown didn't have magical, superhuman vision. Their discoveries were entirely dependent on technology. It was the invention of the microscope and its continuous improvement, eventually leading to the incredibly powerful electron microscope that finally revealed all those intricate structural details of the cell. Without this physico-chemical approach to biology, the microscopic world would have just remained a complete mystery to us. Which brings us to Section 3, the Classical Cell Theory. Students mix these next two scientists up all the time, so let's methodically break them down to avoid that trap. First up, in 1838, we have Matthias Schleiden. He was a German botanist. He examined a huge number of plants and observed that all plants are composed of different kinds of cells which together form plant tissues. Then, just one single year later, in 1839, we get Theodore Schwann. He was a British zoologist. Schwann studied different types of animal cells and reported that they had this thin outer layer, which today we call the plasma membrane. But Schwann didn't stop at animals. Based on his studies on plant tissues, he also concluded that the presence of a cell wall is a unique character of plant cells. Just think about how incredible that is, a zoologist making a foundational, textbook observation about plants. Based on his own zoological work and Schleiden's botanical discoveries, Schwann took a massive conceptual leap. He proposed a unifying hypothesis that the bodies of both animals and plants are composed of cells and the products of cells. Boom! Together, Schleiden and Schwann officially formulated the foundational cell theory. They literally proved the underlying unity within the immense diversity of life.
However, as brilliant as Schleiden and Schwann were, their classical cell theory had a massive, glaring flaw. Their theory completely failed to explain how new cells were actually formed. They knew all living things are made of cells, sure, but they had absolutely no idea where those cells came from in the first place. Did they just crystallize out of bodily fluids? Did they magically appear out of thin air? It was a huge, lingering biological mystery.
Let's see how they solved it in Section 4, Modern Cell Theory. To solve the great mystery of where cells come from, enter Rudolf Virchow in the year 1855. I want you to anchor that specific year in your brain. Virchow was the first to explain that cells divide and that new cells are formed from pre-existing cells. He summarized this beautiful continuous chain of life with a famous, punchy Latin phrase, Omnis cellula-e cellula. By proving that every single cell comes from an older cell that divided, he successfully modified the original hypothesis of Schleiden and Schwann. Thanks to Virchow's brilliant addition, the cell theory was given its final, modernized shape. The modern cell theory, exactly as it's understood by scientists today, rests firmly on two fundamental pillars. Number one, all living organisms are composed of cells and products of cells. That's the lasting legacy of Schleiden and Schwann. And number two, all cells arise from pre-existing cells. That is the game-changing contribution of Rudolf Virchow. Together, these two pillars form the bedrock of all modern biology, proving that all life is connected through an unbroken, historical chain of cellular division.
All right, Section 5. Let's do a quick Part 1 recap to lock this all in.
Let's rapid-fire synthesize our key takeaways from today. First, the core definition. A cell is the absolute fundamental, structural, and functional unit of life. Anything less than a complete cell simply cannot survive independently. Historically speaking, Robert Hooke coined the term, but Leeuwenhoek was the first to actually see a live cell, and Robert Brown discovered the nucleus. Schleiden the botanist and Schwann the zoologist formulated the classical cell theory in 1838 and 1839. And finally, in 1855, Rudolf Virchow perfected the whole thing with Omnis cellula-e cellula, proving once and for all that all cells arise from pre-existing cells. So, now that we know what a cell is and exactly where it comes from, what on earth is going on inside of it? How do different types of life organize their cellular machinery? Well, I'm going to leave you with this thought. In the next part, we will explore the two major categories of cells, prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells, and understand how cellular organization evolved. You definitely won't want to miss it. Keep studying, stay curious, and I'll catch you in Part 2 of this Explainer series.